tell me first, what does it do to a child? Domestic violence against a young boy.
I can speak to my own experience and through what I've learned in coursework. Domestic violence is a whole bunch of things to kids, right? It
Mm-hmm.
teaches them very young that if that's happening to you or if that's happening in your home, that, that's what you deserve.
Eugene Bertrand, good afternoon from you in New York City. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to talk today about a very difficult, hard topic of the hidden epidemic of domestic violence against males. And you are my perfect guest because you've written a book, which we're going to get into.
Yeah.
But first, I told you just before we started recording, like you are a busy guy. So I see you're intern at Federal Public Defender's Office in your area. You're
Yeah.
finishing up your master's of social work at Columbia, and you're 23 years old. And your
Yeah.
book is called Resilience: Breaking the Chains. Just that title, I love. Love it.
Thank you.
So before we dive into this whole huge issue of domestic violence against men, tell me about yourself in terms of, let's start easier with your work and what you're doing now before we get into the more personal stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I'm Eugene, and I'm just really kind of just enjoying the fact that folks are reading my book and they're really engaging with the piece of literature that I've written. And I'm also really loving my experience doing my work at the Federal Defender. Some of my work there includes humanizing the clients that are charged with federal crimes. Oftentimes there's a story behind why they're charged.
Okay, can we just pause on that? Because I actually was reading that about you on your LinkedIn bio. I love that there is research into somebody's past life because, like, I've worked with many kids that have records and, probation officers, and there's always something behind that. And we're
Exactly.
so quick to judge horrific behavior, which is, I'm not taking away, it's still horrific, but
Yeah.
there are so many reasons layered. So,
Yeah.
what do you do with it? Like, you find out what happened to them, and then what?
Yeah. And so we would meet with a client, and then oftentimes what we'll do is we're really trying to find an alternative pathway to incarceration. So with folks that are currently incarcerated, we meet with them and we try to figure out, why did you commit this crime?
Hmm.
Are there any like circumstances that might have contributed to that? Or we'll meet with the family. Sometimes we'll go 1, 2 generations back to try to figure out if there's like any mental health diagnoses that have contributed to X, Y, and Z person committing the crime. And then we're part of the defense team. So then we are able to argue for a less harsher sentence.
Okay, based on their history.
Exactly.
Okay, here's a
Exactly.
question for you. I don't expect you to know this, but
Yeah.
I'm really curious. So
Yeah.
you know ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. You did
Yeah.
that. So trauma score out of 10. 10 out of 10 is like every bad thing possibly done to you has been done to you. Do you know the average trauma scores of the people that you work with, or is there any data, or can you kind of say that maybe just anecdotally?
That's a good question. Um, I'd probably say it would be, I'd probably say it was up there. I don't know if I can give a number,
Okay.
but I would definitely say that it would be probably like right in the middle.
Okay, like five,
Um,
six.
Probably like maybe like a 6,
Yeah.
only because there are mitigating factors, right, that people don't consider,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's case is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people are currently incarcerated because of things that might have happened to them, because they might have a certain diagnoses, they might not have known what they were doing, and that's why I love my work doing
Yeah.
mitigation,
Yeah.
because you're in this place where you can humanize them,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I absolutely love it.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about you personally. So, what do you want to tell me about your upbringing? You've written a book about domestic violence against males, and I'm using the word males because we know there's domestic violence against boys, teenage males, and men in their 60s, 70s, 80s. So, that's why I use the word males.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell me that is your story to tell
Yeah.
about your personal life and upbringing?
Yeah, so I was raised by a very strong um, mother, and my grandmother. They were very instrumental in my life, and they've taught me the importance of wearing my heart on my sleeve and
Mm,
the power of being vulnerable. And the and within that, I've always kind of led with that in whatever I was doing in my life, whether that's academic writing, whether that's, playing a sport. I've always been able to kind of speak up. But I recognize that when I endured my own situation with domestic violence, speaking up was something that was really difficult for me to do.
yeah.
And in that experience, that's when I told myself, maybe I write the book.
Did you feel at the time, so there was domestic violence towards you, did you feel at the time that you didn't have a voice or people didn't want to hear?
And that's exactly what I felt, Suzanne. I think that when I was enduring that, like, to be very clear, I almost lost my life. I
Hmm.
almost died. And because society oftentimes discourages males, to kind of share their story and be vulnerable,
Hmm.
I'm to be so honest, I was so nervous to even say anything because on one
Yeah.
hand, I almost lost my life, and on the other hand, I'm dealing with what society might say about me saying I'm a survivor of this, and this is what I'm
Yeah.
going to do moving forward. But I didn't feel like I had a voice.
I have so many questions that we're going to get to about that particular issue. I
Yeah.
actually want to know though, so how has your upbringing shaped who you are today in terms of the good that was done to you and the bad that was done to you?
That's a really good question. I think that what I've learned is that you have to live every single day like it's your last.
Hmm.
And I've also recognized the power of forgiveness. And sometimes you have to forgive the other person. What I had to do was forgive the other person, um, so I can forgive myself, right? Because in me kind of feeling like I had no voice, I was almost kind of doing myself a disservice because I recognized that there's so much power in vulnerability.
Hmm.
So I had to recognize a lot of things. And I think the biggest thing that I recognized was that there's so much power in
There
forgiveness.
is. So when you say to forgive yourself, do you mean that you didn't speak up for yourself in the moment?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think it was hard for me to even talk about it, right? Because
Yeah.
you're dealing up with that internal conflict. And, with motivation, it has to be intrinsic. You have to have that self motivation to be able to do things like speak up, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was really struggling with it. And then at some point, I was talking to my friends and I shared that I almost died with my friends. And they were like, Eugene, like this same thing happened to me too. And that's when
Wow.
I recognized it was like bigger than
Nobody
me.
speaks up. Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
speaks up.
Yeah. I love the idea of forgiveness that you're setting your own self free.
Yeah.
It's setting you
Yeah.
free.
That's exactly why I named my book Resilience Breaking the Chains, because
Mm,
at that point, I
hmm.
recognized that I wanted to be part of that solution to help break those societal chains and lead with resilience,
Hmm.
because it's bigger than me. I have a little brother who's 4, and I wanted to show him that, you don't necessarily have to write a book at 22, but what you can do is you can be vulnerable, you can be resilient, and
Right.
just because society might tell you something, but doesn't always mean that you have to follow that. You can kind of step out and do your own
Yeah.
thing.
Uh, in writing the book, what are you the most passionate about in terms of like the messaging you want to send? And you've got a lot of messaging.
Yeah.
What's the number one driving passion for
You know,
you?
I think that the biggest thing, the most thing that I'm proud about in the piece of literature that I've written is that I was really able to kind of redefine what strength is, right?
Mm,
Not as like really suppression, but as self awareness, right? And in my book, I really kind of hone in on the fact that masculinity can coexist with vulnerability,
yeah,
and that we need to normalize things like therapy tears.
that is it. I think that's it. Like masculinity is symbiotic
It is.
with vulnerability. You can have the two
It is.
together and they work with each other,
They
feed off
do
each other. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly a hundred
Yeah. That's
percent.
powerful.
You
That's
know?
powerful. I want to now get into the problem of violence against men. And then I want to
Yeah,
talk about the solution next, but I want to dig into what the problem is. So
yeah.
I was researching for this. So I'm in Canada here, Vancouver, BC.
Yeah.
Statistics Canada in 2020 issued, like, gave a report of intimate partner violence, which is different than domestic, but it's I think still, I think we still have the same issues of boys and
Right.
teens and men not speaking up. And in the reports that were given to police of violent situation, 20% were males. That's a good number. Like, that's a high
Yeah.
number. So with that, my question is, what do you think that is number one holding men back in reporting violence of any time, domestic partner?
I think the cultural silence, right, around
Mm,
male survivors, like, has a huge reflection on gender and power norms.
mhm,
I think that's what I'd say. Like, I think that when men suffer abuse, it disrupts traditional power dynamics. So, silence ends up becoming survival. And I think that we need to kind of create a space where people are vulnerable and people can talk about their
yeah,
emotions, because what is happening is, you know boys, teens, men, they're suppressing their emotions,
mhm,
doing so because they don't always have the space, or the environment to feel them, because again, society tells us not to, tells us don't cry, don't
yeah,
ask for help,
yeah.
don't feel how you feel.
I'm, if I can add to that, I
Yeah.
I'm allowed to speak as a woman. You're not.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going to speak as a woman.
Exactly.
And I said to you
Right.
earlier, I have strong opinions about this. We
Yeah.
have done a lot of disservice to men to silence men as women. I am the first person for the Me Too movement, but I'm not at the detriment of men being quiet. And I have girlfriends that I've had dialogues with that really don't have a lot of patience for what a man might do. And I have said, are you kidding me? Do you
Yeah.
want me to tell you about the teenage girls that I have worked with
Yeah.
that are absolutely
Yeah.
vicious? And so I think that part of it is there's a perspective and rhetoric that it is always the man that's the perpetrator and
Yeah.
that the woman's weaker. And as a woman, I that's offensive to me. It's offensive.
It is. It's very offensive.
So I think
Yeah.
we've just done a lot. And I don't know if there's a documentary called Red Pill.
Mhm.
Watch it. It's so
Mhm.
good. She's a feminist that did the documentary, but she talks about
Mhm.
like what she's learned about, whoa, like what's not
Wow.
being done for men and the silencing of
Wow.
men. And for example, like, guess what? If you're in a domestic dispute and the man hits back, guess who's going to go to jail? It's going to be the men. And I actually, I dated a guy that he had violence towards him and he couldn't hit her
Yeah.
back. She
Yeah.
was beating him up
Yeah.
and he couldn't hit her back.
And that's the thing too. Like, I think it's really important to make sure that, when you're entering these relationships, you're able to enter them with emotional maturity,
Hmm.
so that, if you feel yourself getting to that place, you step back. Like, you try not to engage, because that can be a life ruiner for you.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. So, and why do you think, like, you talk about stigma in your book, why do you think, alongside, well, this is kind of an extenuating question from the first one,
Yeah.
that violence against males is so invisible? Like, I think we
Yeah.
touched upon it already, but it is really invisible.
It is. I think because a lot of people don't want to sit with the discomfort, because when you're
Mm,
disclosing things, when you're talking about, like, when people have self-disclosure, it can be really triggering, right? And oftentimes, like, honestly, I believe that when men are being vulnerable and they're talking about their emotions, in specific, talking about a domestic violence situation, people are like, "Oh my, wait, what?" Like, you almost kind of say, like, "Huh?"
yeah,
And then society
yeah,
almost is just like, oftentimes society says, "How'd you let that happen to you? You're a man. You should be
yeah,
stronger than that. What did you do to put yourself in that situation?"
totally,
But
totally.
it can be such a deeper picture than that, and
Right.
nobody really
Yeah,
wants to do, that deeper lens. It's
yeah.
really important to kind of, think about that there.
You know, one thing I find shocking is women's shelters versus men's shelters for domestic
Yeah,
violence. I mean, we
I
said 20% of men report it. That's not
yeah,
the ratio of our support shelters within violence.
it's,
There's nowhere near that percentage for men versus women. Women get all of the shelters
So
for,
sad. Isn't that so
safety.
sad?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just did I contributed to the National Association of Social Workers, their blog talking about this for Domestic Violence Awareness Month
Hmm.
this past October,
Okay.
and I was talking about that in there, how there aren't spaces for men to go to have like some type of shelter. Oftentimes they get turned away. And I think we have
Yeah.
to ask our society, why is that?
Yeah.
Why do we feel like we can turn men away from seeking that same
Yeah.
support that women, rightfully
Yeah.
so, should be
Yeah.
able to receive?
A
You
woman
know,
wouldn't be turned away.
exactly.
They wouldn't. It's
And
interesting. My husband and I volunteer at our local shelter. So our
yeah,
Vancouver downtown east side is really, really lo- huge, huge number of people
yeah,
that live with substance use disorders, mental health disorders, biggest homelessness population in Canada.
yeah,
We were serving on like a Tuesday night or something, serving dinner.
hmm,
I would say that 90% of the guests were male.
hmm,
90% at this shelter for just
yeah,
come for dinner. And I
yeah,
walked away, saying, what are we doing?
hmm,
Why is I'm not seeing 50-50?
yeah,
Why are the men the ones that are coming for a meal at a
hmm,
shelter and using the shelter more by like infinitely more numbers, infinitely
yeah,
greater?
yeah. I've honestly seen the same thing here in the U.S. And honestly, it's so disheartening, and it's so funny that you mentioned serving, volunteering some of your time at your local shelter, because I do the same thing. Every single Christmas, I always donate some food,
Hmm.
and I try to engage in conversation with folks,
Yeah.
because I think so far, so often, people think it's, even though it's a great act of service and a great act of kindness to contribute, I think it's also really important to meet people with the same level of respect that you'd want to be met with.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I go out of my way to engage in conversation and genuinely ask, "How are you doing?"
Yeah.
That can make somebody's day.
It's what
You
I learned
know?
about homelessness when I was
Yeah,
teaching at the psych unit is the worst thing of homelessness is being invisible. Nobody sees you. Nobody says your name. We took our
yeah,
kids. We took our kids to serve with us once. I said, you say their
yeah,
name, find out their
yeah.
name, say their name over and
Exactly,
over again because they don't hear the name. Nobody says their name. Like you
exactly,
are worthy and you matter
exactly,
and you are still here with a purpose. And it's
exactly.
that not being spoken to. Okay, here's my last question. I think this is a heavier one
Yeah,
of our problem before we move into solutions.
yeah.
Can you articulate for me what violence, either domestic or partner, all of that, towards a man does to your soul, like the soul of a man? And it's a bit like number one is maybe to a child. We know when trauma is done, the earlier the worse, the more detrimental and the more longer effects and damaging, the earlier that happens. But also just to the soul of a man.
Yeah.
So
That's a
do
really good
you want
question.
to start with a child? Start with a child and then grow,
Yeah. Okay.
walk with me. Like what to a child? What does it do?
So give it to me again. So
Child.
child.
Tell me first, what does it do to a child? Domestic violence against a young boy.
Yeah. I can speak to my own experience and through what I've learned in coursework. Domestic violence is a whole bunch of things to kids,
Mm,
right? It
hmm.
teaches them very young that, that if that's occurring or if that's happening to you, or if that's happening in your home, that, that's what you deserve.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
how you become when you get into your own intimate partner relationship, right? It also teaches the child that, this is, it teaches the child that, it's okay to be silent when they say
Mm,
shut up, say anything.
hmm.
This house stays in this house. It shows the child that, they have no voice. And that also directly influences their self esteem.
Yeah.
And then they come into different spaces, and that comes out in different ways. So, oftentimes, when we're in a school setting and there's a child that's acting out, how many times are we thinking about what is happening at home? Sometimes what's
Yeah.
happening at home is domestic violence,
Right.
and they're acting out in school, or they can be very silent. They can go mute and not say anything because they're not able to have the wherewithal to even vocalize those emotions, because that traumatic event that they're kind of seeing every single day or every other day or however often that might occur
Hmm.
has directly impacted them.
Hmm. I mean, I know you know this. This is more your expertise than mine. I researched this though for my thesis, that we only really have a good understanding of what childhood trauma does since the late 1990s, like 1998, right? When Fellini brought out the first ACEs, childhood
Exactly.
trauma study. So this is new understanding too of what
Yeah.
trauma, like to any gender, what trauma does.
Yeah.
It's like
And
your lifetime of
that's the thing.
impact.
I think a lot of children as well, like they mirror their parents' coping mechanisms,
Hmm.
unspoken trauma that's passed down, you know? And what I've learned in my work is that, we have to really make sure that we're looking beyond that child or that client,
Yeah,
whoever,
yeah,
beyond the lineage. And that goes again to my work doing mitigation at the federal defender,
right, right.
going beyond that paper and you're getting that story, asking
Yeah,
those questions why, you know?
yeah, for sure. Okay, so what does it does do to a man? So say partner violence.
Yeah,
What does that do
that's
to the soul of a man?
just a whole bunch.
I
It,
can't
it,
imagine.
it does
Yeah,
a whole bunch, Suzanne. It does
yeah.
a whole bunch. I think as a man, I think intimate partner violence. Are you talking about like witnessing it, or are you talking about being on the receiving
inflicted
end of it?
upon inflicted upon the man.
I think it diminishes their. It has the potential to diminish their self worth,
Hmm.
right? Because they might be trapped in a few internal push and pulls. They might be asking themselves, "Am I less of a man because this is happening to me?"
Yeah.
Or what am I supposed to do in this situation? Am I supposed to fight back and take this and then be seen as weak or less than? Who am I supposed
Hmm.
to talk to? Because if I talk to my friends, they're gonna look at me as less than. And it also allows you to question your own self worth. Like you're questioning,
Hmm.
like, am I a man? But am I worthy to even be in this space? Right?
Yeah.
I think when you're enduring that as a male, as a man, you're 9 times out of 10 still trying to operate in this life, trying to figure out who you are.
Hmm.
I can tell you right now, as a boy that's growing into a man right now, every single day you're trying to get to the better version of you,
Right.
right? Every single day you're trying to, better yourself. And I can confidently say that, if, a man is enduring that pain, that is inflicting so many deeper, deeper internal wounds within them
Hmm.
because oftentimes they don't have the space to speak.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what happens is you've probably seen like memes or like you've been in conversations where men have talked about engaging a lot in video games, right? Whether that's like playing like The Sims or like 2K. I can give Sims as an example. A lot of men, they'll engage a lot in Sims, which is a video game. You can do it on the computer, your cell phone, or like a gaming console.
Hmm.
And that simulator allows you to operate like a different family. And you're able to, do whatever you want with them. You're literally living your life through them.
Hmm.
And oftentimes, what ends up happening is men really focus a lot on that game. They're on the game all the time. When they wake up, when they want to chill and relax, they're on the game.
Hmm.
They're oftentimes met from their partner with, get off that little game. Why are you always on that game? Well, they're on that game because that's their escape. They are able to have that autonomy through their life if it was taken away from them through the game.
Hmm.
They're literally able to alter, some other life that's taking place in a gaming console because they might not feel like they have the autonomy to do it
Right.
in the modern day, you
Right.
know?
You just get handicapped. Your hands are tied behind your back
Yeah,
with
that's the
life.
thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Let's move now to what you do with it. So to the solution. So I want to shift then of
Yeah,
where is the hope and forgiveness and resilience. So my first question is, tell me about the strength that is needed to overcome the trauma of violence for a man.
that's a really good question, Suzanne. I think that a few things really. I think that I think I mentioned earlier that you have to have that intrinsic motivation.
Mm,
You know, like you have to kind of find it within yourself to be able to say, I want better for myself. This is not a reflection of me,
hmm.
and this is what I'm going to do. I can say that my motivation behind me writing my book and me kind of really engaging in healing was that I had a little brother that was watching me. He looked
Right.
up to me. And my responsibility in it was to honor people, was to heal myself. I engaged in deep EMDR,
Oh, did
right?
you?
Oh,
It
absolutely.
worked?
Absolutely did.
Hmm.
After a few sessions,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I recognized that I wanted to be a part of the solution to honor
Yeah.
those who've carried invisible wounds in silence.
Can you just define for anybody listening who doesn't know EMDR, the acronym, and in
Yeah.
like 30 seconds what that is? Because I think that's a really important tool for people with
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah, so eye movement desensitization reprocessing
Hmm.
therapy, and it allows you the opportunity to kind of recognize those emotions. But like, at least with me in my experience, they were really, it was a really traumatic experience for me.
Hmm.
I wasn't able to sleep and I was really struggling. And through like hand movements, that's how my therapist did it. They did it through hand
Yeah.
movements to allow me to reprocess those emotions safely. Because with the trauma, it gets stuck in your brain.
Hmm.
And having the eye movements and engaging in that type of psychotherapy allows you the opportunity to process it in the right way.
Do you know that I was researching about EMDR and they've linked the same brain waves as our REM sleep with
Yes.
EMDR, our good restorative REM sleep. They've
Yes.
linked with the same. Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting, hey?
isn't that cool?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honestly, and you mentioned it earlier, like the all of the great research like that we're getting, like now in 2025 is amazing. You know
Hmm.
what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Because folks are healing and folks
yeah.
are constantly getting better, and
Yeah.
I'm absolutely here for it and I'm loving it,
Yeah.
you know?
And when we know better, we don't just do better, that Maya Angelou says,
Yeah,
we respond better when we know
yeah,
better. We
exactly. I
respond
agree with
better.
you
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, but you have to want the opportunity to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
better. So
I,
I'm really,
is your mother a strong force of strength in your life?
she is.
Because
Yeah.
I'm listening to you, and listen, Eugene, some people would descend into substance use.
Yeah.
Some people would not even begin to consider anything beyond just surviving. So
Hmm.
I've interpreted what you're saying, like you had to have something really grounding in your life to still build up that self-worth when
Yeah.
you had it removed with the violence.
Yeah. To answer your question, yeah, absolutely. My mom is my driving force,
Yeah.
and I recognize that there was power, like I said, in vulnerability. And she is also in the same field that I am, the mental health
Okay.
field. And so I see her every single day, putting on that therapist cap. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think what she really does that inspires me is she takes care of herself.
Oh,
So she
yeah.
has her own therapist. And
Okay.
so I knew that in doing this work, I had to make sure that I did that right to get
Yeah.
myself right
Yeah.
before I was able to hold space and support others.
Yeah.
But I would say my mom is, really influential in my life. And being able to write my book, having somebody of such significance in my life by my side, definitely encouraged the pages that are in
Well,
there.
and I think one of the messaging then for households that have violence is you
Yeah,
need one parent
yeah,
or one adult to build you up and esteem you and do all of the opposite of the bad things that are being done to you.
mhm,
And that I've had that with other students too, that
yeah,
there's still things, that strength that arises
yeah.
to go
I
through the
agree,
work.
and I agree. I think it can be a parent, it can be a chosen family
Hmm.
member,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It can be somebody that they can look to for
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
when they feel like they haven't
Yeah.
gotten it,
You,
especially when it's like a domestic violence situation.
you know what it is? I think it is. I want to, if I can summarize, I think it's that one person that says, I see you. You are
Yes.
worthy. I know
Yeah.
you can do this. I've got your back. It's that. It's that really, and it might be unspoken messaging. But
Yeah,
my big thing on the psychiatric unit was you are worthy. That was it. How can I instill self-worth to my
exactly.
students that had all of it stripped from them?
And that's the thing too. I think a lot of the times from what I'm hearing in my work and just from my own experience, a lot of people feel like they're not living, they're just surviving. And a lot, you know what I'm saying, right?
It's my
And a
next
lot of,
question. It's my next
yeah,
question. Finish up. I'm gonna ask. Finish up. I'm reading it. It's right
yeah.
here. Go ahead. Go. Go.
So, and you know, what I've recognized is I'm really enjoying the opportunity to create the space for
Yeah.
people to, you know, feel like they're actually living their life to the you know fulfillment that they feel like they
Yeah.
want to.
I did a interview with Gabe Howard about bipolar disorder, and what he said has stuck with me.
Yeah,
People don't want to just get by. People want to thrive. Like put
exactly,
that on a billboard. So here's
exactly.
you on it. I'm not kidding. This is the next question. Can you
Yeah,
differentiate for me between survival and resilience?
yeah. I think when I think about the word resilience, I think a lot of people think about it as like the bounce back,
Sure.
like how quick you're able to kind of, um, you know, go through something and come back for it and come back from it. But I think about resilience in like a sense of transformation.
Hmm.
And when I think about survival, I think about, you know, like I said earlier, you're surviving. You're not really being present in the moment. You're doing everything just to get by. Or I think that could be one of the definitions of, you know, a way to kind of describe surviving.
Yeah.
You're doing things just to get by,
Yeah.
but, you know, you might not be fully present in the moment.
Yeah. I just thought of something. I wonder if
Yeah.
survival is not dying. Like I'm
Yeah.
not dying, and then wait, and I wonder if like strength and resilience is I am living.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
truly living. So survival is I'm not dying. I'm
Yeah.
here. I'm not dead.
Right.
And resilience and strength is I am
And
living
and
and
that's
thriving.
the thing. Like
Just came to
I
me. I
feel
don't
like
know.
and no, and I think you're right. I feel like with survival, it's like I feel like it would be like the process of like managing like the immediate danger or stress in order, like you said, to like not die. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
to like even
yeah,
avoid whatever harm might be there. And like resilience really has the opportunity to, you know, have like that long term effect,
yeah,
right? Like to kind of be in a space where you're able to, you know, thrive, you know, despite whatever challenge you may have
yeah.
endured. You know? So yeah,
Yeah, I've always said too, I really think I think it's really important to define the spectrum of grit and resilience because I
mm,
have some kids right now, I'm not kidding, just to see me after school to get a bit of
yes,
work done when the school is cleared out, that's their grit. That's what they can manage, right?
I agree.
My
Yeah,
I was raised with zero trauma and my grit was I could do
yeah,
12-hour work days on a
yeah,
PhD
yeah.
like it just we have so many different backgrounds and histories and so I sometimes hesitate with that word of resilience because what are we talking about but it is a spectrum.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think resilience can involve so many different things, like
Hmm.
recovery or adapting to something, or that's like when I think about resilience, I think about like how you're able to like regulate your emotions, and I think about like wellness and how you're able to kind of grow from every situation.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
again, like I mentioned, a lot of people think a lot of people define resilience as like the bounce back, how quick you're able to kind of recover from something.
Yeah.
But people don't recognize that resilience, in my opinion, can also encompass maintaining your emotional and mental
Yeah,
health,
I
right?
agree. I totally agree.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And I really love how you brought in grit there too. Like when I think about grit, I think of like persevering and I think about like passion and like sticking with something, you
Hmm.
know, and you know, having like goal attainment and, you know, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
So before I do my oh so famous wrap up question,
Yeah.
I my last question here of just solutions. Tell me, what is a woman's role in all of this to mitigate the stigma, the silence, the shame of violence towards men
Yeah.
in a world of Me Too movements?
Ooh, that's a good question, Suzanne.
That's a hard, that's a
I
hard
love
one.
your
I'm not.
questions.
I'm sure I'm going to get some hate for some stuff I've said about women on this.
Yeah, no, I like your questions. You know, I feel like a woman's role could be just to hold space, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think it can go either way, a man or woman, whoever, you know what I'm saying? I think holding space and being non-judgmental, because
Yeah.
like I mentioned earlier in the very beginning, when you're talking about your trauma and when you're talking about something that is the trigger for you, you don't want to be met with, oh, or okay. You want to be met with genuine care and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
empathy. You want people to be there that are supportive. So I would say, to answer your question, to never jump to conclusions and to not always feel like you have to provide a resolution.
Right.
Sometimes, our men just need a space to
Mm-hmm.
be heard, especially when they're
Yeah.
disclosing something that can be really traumatizing.
I think a woman's role too is to end this very damaging rhetoric of the big bad man who's always the perpetrator, who's always the violent one, who's the one that's inflicting all of our historical problems. Listen, things have happened,
Yeah,
absolutely, that maybe women didn't do. But I also think, and I'm huge into like taking responsibility. I'm huge into like I'm responsible for my decisions despite my background. I'm still
yeah,
responsible for what I do today if I want to end generational trauma. And I'm also big on responsibility of women aren't perfect.
yeah.
Women can be not nice, and I just think that opening that dialogue to understand like our own role in things.
I
And
agree.
I don't think you have to diminish a woman's voice or women's rights or what we're
Right.
doing with Me Too or being heard and believed. I think you can have those two together.
I think so too. And I think another huge word is intersectionality. And I think that we have to
Mm,
make sure that, we're standing in solidarity with one another
yeah,
because
yeah,
we're stronger in numbers and we're better together than we are
yeah,
apart. And I think when you kind of find yourself like diminishing one person's experience versus the others,
mm-hmm,
that's where
mm-hmm,
clash can. And again, like I mentioned, nobody wants to be met with any type of, ill emotion or ill feeling when they're disclosing something that can be super traumatic,
yeah,
regardless of regardless of what may have happened in the past. I think our biggest responsibility is how we can move forward and be the best version of ourselves in the present day.
yeah, yeah. Good. Okay,
You
wrap
know?
up questions.
Yeah.
I'm wrapping up, taking us back to the goal of just really tackling this issue of violence towards males. Can you tell me the best advice you would give to any male of any sort of violence for getting help?
Yeah. Recognizing that your vulnerability is your strongest superpower. I want you, if there's a man that's listening to this that's in this situation, I want you to know that, your vulnerability can be your strongest superpower, especially if you have people looking up to you. I
Mm,
didn't realize that I was speaking. I knew I was writing a book, Suzanne, but I didn't know that it was actually going to like reach people in the way that it would reach people and then become a bestseller. But somebody had reached out to me and told me that, my vulnerability allowed them the opportunity to start therapy and take part in their healing. I want you to recognize that if you start something, it can create a ripple effect.
mm, okay. Next question. We talked about your mother. What
Yeah.
can parents do to create safe and loving homes for any child within the midst of maybe some domestic violence that's happening?
I think I'd probably say to do a few things. I'd probably say to model emotional maturity.
Okay.
I'd probably say a model what that looks like naming your emotions and normalizing conversations that might be difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to validate emotions, even if you don't agree with them. Let your child know that their emotions are valid, right?
Yep.
Instead of like punishing them, instead of saying like stop crying or be a man or all those
Right.
things, or even like encouraging healthy coping strategies. I think we talk about them, but like when you're in the midst, it can be hard, you know? So I think I would say those three things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you think about the concept of get out? It's just so it feels so complicated, like getting out of the situation with your children. Sounds easier said than done in many
Yeah.
circumstances, and we have, I think, a lot of judgment towards maybe staying in a relationship.
Yeah. I think, well, tell me a little bit more about your question. Tell me some more.
I mean, get out about if somebody's in a household with domestic violence, that the non-inflicting parent get out of that relationship and out of the household with the children.
Hmm. I think what I've learned is that you can only do the best
Yeah.
in whatever situation that you're in. And I recognize that, you know, everybody has their own level of like when they want to say, I'm done.
Hmm.
Cannot force somebody to do that,
Yeah.
right? You can encourage, you can try to push, but if you push too hard, that can be met with a level of like reluctance to kind of share more about their situation,
Yeah. Good point.
you know?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I like I said when I started my question, it feels like it's wrought with judgment of people saying get out,
Yeah,
and it seems so complicated, like so much more complicated
I
in
agree.
all these situations where there is domestic violence, of the actual getting out and away
Yeah,
from the violence.
exactly. And I think, you know, when you're on the outside looking in on different people's situations,
Hmm.
it can be easy, like you said, to judge, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
lots of judgment.
getting, you know, and I think
Hmm.
getting out of a situation can encompass a lot of different things. You have to think about, especially if, you know, you have children to think about too,
Yeah,
because it's not just you,
yeah,
it's how many other lives after you. You have to think about like the financial replications of things, you
yeah,
know? So,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
good
Okay,
question.
here's my last question. What is the one like primary thing of everything we talked about? The one primary thing it's going to take to end the stigma of violence towards males?
I think when you asked me that question about how it starts from a child
Yeah.
and we went up to like manhood, I think you have to really start practically and start at the home level. I think it starts from, you know, when you're young. I think kids have to see emotional literacy and emotional maturity being demonstrated to be able
Hmm.
to do that in their adulthood. They need to feel like their emotions are being validated instead of being punished. They have to feel like they have routines that are like predictable, like consistent schedules, rules, consequences. Because you know, trauma thrives in things like chaos,
Yeah.
but stability
Yeah.
counters that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to also just kind of again encourage those healthy strategies. So I think the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this conversation is that we have to kind of try to do these things when these kids are young, you know, because then they're
Yeah.
learning. Just like they have to learn to walk, they have to learn to drink. It has to be demonstrated.
Hmm. It feels too like just talking about it is key. What we're doing right now is pivotal for young children, for any age group, and talk, just end the stigma.
And the stigma, you know
Talk
what I'm
about it.
saying?
Hmm.
Just that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, like I mentioned, they're nervous about it. People don't want to talk about it. But again, your vulnerability is your superpower. When
Yeah.
you're talking about
Yeah.
conversation that might be difficult,
Yeah.
you know, you can alter the conversation to figure out how you want to have the conversation or have conversations
Hmm.
about topics like this. But they're all very essential
Yeah.
and they can be transformative.
Hmm. Okay. Eugene Bertrand, where can we find you? And your book's on Amazon. I will put things into show notes, but tell me
Yeah.
where we find you.
Absolutely. So I'm on LinkedIn, Eugene Z Bertrand. I'm on Facebook, and you could also reach me at my website, eugenezbertrand.com.
You are going to do big things in this world.
Thank you.
You're going to
Thank you.
do big things, Eugene.
You and me both.
You have longer. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Now, you can do your part and share this with a parent who needs to hear more about the critical nature of domestic violence and partner violence towards males. You can click like on that little link below and subscribe to my channel. There are many more dialogues and interviews to come of how you can support your child and know better and get on their turf. I'll see you next time.